to Networking Arizona with host Carol Blonder. You'll hear interviews with businesses located throughout the valley. Networking, it makes a difference.
If I traded it all.
Welcome to the show, everyone. And as all of you know, I made it possible for everybody to talk about themselves right on the radio. If you want to get yourself heard, just give us a call here at 602-277-5369. We'll get you hooked up with me to get yourself heard on Networking Arizona. I'm going to go right in with my first guest. I am so glad he's here because so many people today, I don't care who you are, it can happen to anyone. I have with me Ryan Borges, and he's the owner of the Borges Law Firm. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Carol. I'm glad to be here.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself and what we're going to talk about today.
Well, I'm an attorney here in the Valley, and I practice criminal defense and DUI defense, and I've been doing that for about 13 years now.
Well, thank you, because, you know, there's a lot of people out there, especially around this time of the year. We're all getting a little festive, and you got to be careful out there, guys, and it can happen to anyone. I know that you have some statistics that you want to talk about, so let's talk about what is a DUI in Arizona.
Well, a DUI, basically, you can be charged with multiple counts, but either it's going to be that you're impaired to the slightest degree from either alcohol or drug consumption, or there's what we call a per se statute that says you have a certain blood alcohol concentration, and if it's 0.08% or higher, you can be charged for a DUI on that count. So it's very common for people to come into my office and say, well, I got arrested for a DUI, but I have 2 or 3 charges here for one DUI, and they don't understand why. And that's simply because the way the statute is laid out, you can be convicted for, if you're simply impaired to the slightest degree, the state doesn't have to prove any specific blood alcohol concentration to convict you of a DUI. It just has to show that whatever alcohol you consumed, it could be 1 drink, it could be 5 drinks, however much you consumed impaired your ability to operate that motor vehicle safely. So you could have a BAC of 0.04%, which is half the legal limit. But if you're driving all over the road, you can be convicted of what we typically call the A1, impaired to the slightest degree count.
It's a zero tolerance.
Basically, it is.
Okay, but you're here to help. That's the whole point why we're here today, is to get the word out of who you are, what you do, and also to get this information. Here's the thing, guys. I think that everybody should put the phone number in their phone, and that number is 602-772-4929. His website is Borges, B-O-R-G-E-S, lawaz.com, so you can check him out there. But my whole thing about this is, and again, it can happen to anyone. You mentioned, you said drug use also, but drug use isn't just necessarily what some people think certain kinds of drugs are. It's prescription.
No, it can absolutely be prescription drugs. There's a whole, it's what we call the A3 is the drug charge for the DUI. It doesn't have to be illegal drugs like marijuana or cocaine or heroin or any of those type of drugs. It can be prescription medication.
Do you do consultations with people? Is it a free consult? How does that work?
I do. If they call my office, I'll set up a free consultation with them, usually for 30 minutes or so. You
know what? You have to, because you got to know where you're at and what's happened. And the first thing you need to do is to call an attorney. Again, the number is 602-772-4929. It's Borges lawaz.com. You said you've been doing this for 13 years?
I have.
Okay. Now, what should someone do if they're pulled over by the police?
Well, and there's a couple of obvious things. Pull over safely, don't run from the police, that being number one, but I don't want to get into that. But the first thing, you should absolutely have your driver's license, your registration and proof of insurance with you and ready to give to the officer. If you have to fumble around through a wallet or your glove compartment or your purse, officer's going to make note of that. So have it ready and just give it to them, because that's what they're going to ask for. Now, the second thing is, technically you're detained now. You're not under arrest and you're not in custody, but you're detained and you're not free to leave. The officer is going to start asking you questions, especially if he smells an odor of alcoholic beverage. He's going to start asking questions. Have you been drinking tonight? How much have you been drinking? Do you think the alcohol has affected your ability to drive this car? Those are questions that are basically designed to incriminate you. You really can't help yourself by answering those questions, because even if you've had a couple of drinks, if you say, yes, I've had a couple of drinks, they're going to say you've made admissions to drinking. If you say no and it shows you have been drinking, well, then you lied to the officer. So you're in a no-win situation there. So I advise clients that when they start asking you questions like that, simply acknowledge that you have Fifth Amendment rights and you do not want to answer those questions.
Now, it's that time of the year. We're all getting very festive. And some of us, maybe it's you, maybe it's someone that you know. I like to say that because the parents that listening, sometimes their kids get in trouble. It happens. We know that. So write the number down. It is 602-772-4929. He does free consultations. And his website is BorgesLawAZ.com. You're located downtown, and you kind of help everybody in the Phoenix metro area. Okay, so now we know that we really shouldn't be talking to the police, but that's what people do. They do that. They start talking to the police because they think they're smarter than them.
Well, it's that. It's also just the situation. Anytime you get pulled over, naturally you're going to be a little bit nervous, especially if you had a drink or two. Police are seen as authority figures, so people don't want to, or they're nervous to actually try to exercise their rights by saying, I'm not going to answer those questions.
Right.
They feel sort of intimidated to some degree.
Well, I think they think they're going to get arrested if they say that.
That could be it too, but I mean, they have to realize that every citizen has rights and you have to protect them because the officer is not going to tell you these things. The officer is not going to tell you, you don't have to answer this question. He wants you to answer. He wants to help make an arrest. He wants to make the case, be able to prove the case in court if you get charged. So he's not going to tell you what your rights are necessarily. You have to be aware of them yourself.
That's why you're here, to talk a little bit about it. And how about this? Should someone agree to do a chemical test?
Well, the chemical test at the roadside is typically what we call a portable breath test or a PBT. It's basically just a handheld device that the officers have. They're going to ask, blow into this. And they may even tell you something like, if it's below an 0.8%, I won't arrest you for DUI, which is not really necessarily the case. Portable breath tests aren't admissible in a DUI trial to prove a particular blood alcohol concentration. So they're not admissible because they are inherently unreliable. So I don't advise clients to do the portable breath test. Now, if you are arrested for a DUI, there is an implied consent law in Arizona which basically says that you are required to submit to a chemical test of the officer's choosing, whether it be a blood test or a breath test. So the officer is going to advise you of this. More agencies are leaning towards drawing blood now than doing breath, but they still do have the Intoxilizer 8000 device that agencies use. Mm-hmm. But you are required to do it if you've been arrested for a DUI. And a lot of people think, well, I'll just refuse, I won't do it, and they won't be able to, to get my blood or breath, they won't be able to prove a BAC level. The problem with that is the officer is going to advise you that your refusal is going to amount to a 12-month suspension and of your driving privileges. They're not going to tell you that what I'm going to do if you refuse is I'm going to get a search warrant signed by a judge, and then I'm going to take it anyway. Because the search warrant is going to be an order that the police have ordering you to comply and give them a sample of your breath or blood. And they'll get it. I mean, even if you're difficult and don't want to do it, I mean, they'll strap you to a chair and take it. So it doesn't do you any benefits to refuse to do the test. You ultimately will have to submit because you want to avoid that 12-month suspension.
Right, because you can get, it does affect your driver's license. I'm going to skip to this because we only have a minute or so here, okay? So will someone have to spend time in jail if they are convicted of a DUI?
They will. There's mandatory jail time under Arizona law. And depending on the level of the DUI, whether it's a first-time regular DUI, which is 0.08% or higher, it's 10 days jail, but 9 are suspended upon completion of the screening and counseling, so you end up doing 1 day. But if you're charged with either an extreme DUI, which is 0.15% or higher, or a super extreme, which is 0.20% or higher, you're now looking at 30 days and 45 days respectfully.
Well, I'll tell you something. There's a lot of people out there, a lot of people that get good, bad things happen to good people. And it doesn't mean that it's you. It could be someone you know. We want this information out there so that if you need that, you give them a call, put it in your phone. It is 602-772-4929. You do free consultations. And you're talking DUI, but criminal can be anything that you get pulled over for, correct?
It could be. It could be misdemeanor or felony.
Right. And again, he is located downtown. The website is Borges, Borges Law.az.com. He's been doing this for 13 years. Write the number down at 602-772-4929 and be safe out there.